Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third AirOps Live. Today, we have a really exciting session for you where we're going to teach you how to build with the GPT-4 Vision, which opens a ton of use cases. And we're covering more than one use case today. So we hope you can stay until the end and ask us any questions that you might have. Feel free to use the chat in the webinar to talk to other panelists and the other attendees. But if you have any questions, we do have the Q&A part of the event to engage with. Today, we're going to be building with the GPT-4 Vision to extract data from an uploaded image. As you can imagine, it opens a ton of use cases for you, including creating alt tags for your website's images for SEO purposes. This is something that we're going to show you how to do on your Webflow-based websites today, incidentally. But other use cases can be converting handwritten whiteboard notes to structured meeting notes, image classification accurately and quickly, and so on. And I'm sure you can come up with hundreds of more use cases for your daily work. But today, the workflows that we'll be covering are classifying an image quickly and accurately, turning a balance sheet image into Google Sheets data that is accurate and structured correctly. And we'll also be showing you how to extract image links from your web pages, write alt tags using AI, and optionally also add this to your CMS, especially if you're using Webflow. The functions on AirOps that we'll be using today are the GPT-4 Vision and the Google Sheets integration. So we have both of those launched recently. We'll also be using the code step and the iteration step on AirOps. So really excited to show you all of this. But if you like this session and you're interested in being involved with the AirOps community, the next steps you can do are join the community on Twitter. I'll be sending you the link on the chat. You can also apply to the AirOps Builder program if you're interested in taking your skills forward and building out workflows for clients. And finally, if you're already using AirOps and you're recommending AirOps to your clients or other friends to try out, make sure that you apply for the affiliate program so that you can earn commissions on every person that converts into a paying AirOps customer. Thank you so much for joining us, Cindy. I hand it over to you to show us how to.
Sounds great. Thanks, Bensi. I just wanted to welcome everyone to our session today. We have a lot to cover. We're going to be covering a lot of use cases with GPT-4 Vision specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All righty. If you have not been into AirOps yet, I do recommend that you go ahead and set up a free account, a free trial to get started. I've recently set up some templates that we're going to go through. If you go to the template section and scroll to the bottom, we are going to be walking through these image templates today. First, we're going to start with the classification one. We're then going to move to the alt text, to adding alt text to HTML. And finally, we are going to end with the image to data app. So we are sequencing it this way because we want to start with this most simplest app, which is this classification one. And then we're just going to spend more time in some of the more complex apps, which include the alt text and the image to data. So I've already started with the image classification app. Again, if you have any questions as I am working through this, please just drop it in the Q&A and I will be happy to answer your question. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to go to the image app that I have here, image classification. And really what we're going to do in this simple app is we are going to classify an image into a category. This is the most basic of steps or types of applications that we can start with. There are a number of use cases that you can use this for example, image moderation. I also added a quick template here, for example, for a watermark identification. These are much more of kind of binary use cases that are simpler to set up. If I'm going to share with you kind of the images that we're going to go through, if you can see on my screen here, this hilarious photo of Elon Musk, we're going to just put this through a brief image moderation and see, if this is appropriate or not. And then we're also going to identify the watermark with this image right here. So let's go back to the app itself. And let's start with our inputs. So every application has inputs that we set up, and then we run the actual app itself with an LLM step. But let's start with our inputs. Here in the start step, what you're going to do is you're going to take a look at the inputs that we have configured. And for this app, we really have 3 simple inputs. They're actually quite optional. So the first one is the image URL. This is optional in that it either needs to be the URL or the image file. Right now, we cannot require one or the other, so we make them both optional, and we say provide an image URL or upload an image. This image URL is simply a text field, and if you go in, you'll see that this is just a short text. However, the image file is an actual media file. And so when you're setting up your images and you want to upload an image, this needs to be the file media. This media upload can actually support videos, but in this case, it also supports images such as JPEGs or PNG files. Now, the final field is the categories, and this is something that so that you could test this out. Yes, we will be sending out the recording at the end of the call. So the categories are user-defined inputs, and I set this up so that you could just test this out yourself. For context, you can make this prompt much more specific, much more detailed as you test it out. However, for this demo and for the template, we've made it a little bit broader. And so this is kind of our broad image moderation, endpoint that we're going to test out. We have categories such as not offensive, nudity, violence, illegal activity, harassment, or hate speech. We are not going to be testing this out thoroughly. However, if you want to try this out on your own, go for it. I'm going to be testing out simply that Elon Musk photo today. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about this simple prompt that we've set up. So when you're setting up Turbo Vision, you just need to go into the AI model and select the vision model here. Because this is a classification endpoint and we really want it to be tight in terms of and consistent, we're going to turn the temperature down to 0 because the temperature really determines that variability in the output. We want this output to be pretty consistent. And so we're going to turn that to 0. Now, we've set this up so it says, you are an image classifier. Again, if you haven't prompted before, the system is basically telling the AI its, persona as well as its task. We tell it to output in JSON only starting with this bracket and ending with this bracket. We are very literal in this case because sometimes, in this case, I've noticed at times it will output in Markdown instead of starting with this bracket. So that's why I'm very explicit about this format. So we just say your task is to categorize the image into one of the following categories. Use this format, start and end with these brackets. Now, the way that we pass the image into the model is through this field right here. If you notice, you can pass a number of images here. And what we're doing is we're adding a little bit of liquid syntax. So liquid syntax is one of the key languages that we use in AirOps to help us add additional logic. If you remember in our inputs, we have 2 different possible options for the user, a URL or the file. In this case, we want to add that logic such that if they pass in the URL, we will use that URL. However, if there is no URL, we are going to pass the file. All right, so this is how we're passing in our input, which is the image URL. Again, this can be a lot more specific to your use case, to the scenario that you're trying to classify. And we're just going to go ahead and run this as a quick test. I'm going to pass in this Elon Musk photo. I think this is already here. And let's see what it is able to come up with. All right, so in this case, it says not offensive. In general, if there are certain use cases, for example, you want to moderate for children's use cases, you may have to be more specific about the type of prompting that you're going to do and very explicit about the images that you provide to it. So this is not offensive to the model. However, depending on your use case, you may need to prompt it further to say, this type of image is inappropriate or offensive, and specifically provide, those details in this prompt. I will also say it is possible to provide an example to the model if you wanted to. For example, I could pass in any sort of image here and quote unquote train, its response by providing a user assistant pair. I'm not going to go into the user assistant pair and how to set that up. However, we do have a YouTube video available for you to show you how to set up an example, for example, if you wanted to help it understand what is appropriate or not. In this case, I just wanted to show you a quick example of classification, just as the most basic example here. I'm also going to show you this watermark identification one, because it is a great use case for e-commerce, and we're going to reconnect everything here so we can test this one out. In this prompt, we basically have a prompt that says you are a watermark identifier for images, output in JSON only. Again, use this format. And the reason why we are outputting in JSON, you don't always have to output in JSON. However, it's really helpful format for structure and to use this data in a future step. And so we tend to lean towards JSON as our output. In addition, when you run in a batch or run at scale, JSON helps you to actually extract this data and put it into like a CSV format, for example. So I'm just going to show you this example as another one in which you could run, and it could be very specific to your use case, but the actual prompt does not have to be too complicated here. So we're going to test this all. I'm going to drop in this watermark image, and we're going to run this. If you notice, I did not drop in categories into this prompt, so it's not even going to use these categories. It should just give me a true or false. So this image does have a watermark. We should expect it to say true. So there we go. We have true in the output, and this is a great use case, again, for any type of e-commerce use case. If you want to go in and kind of validate your images to make sure that they don't have watermarks. Okay, so this is our first use case. We definitely sped through a little bit just because we have really cool use cases that I want to get to. Do you all have any questions about the image classification? If not, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next use case, which is the alt text. All right, so without any questions, we are just going to keep going forward and move on to the alt text. So if you were with us last week, you probably saw that we had a new template, and we actually published a blog about this template. And what I'm going to do today is basically take our own blog from Webflow and add alt text to these images, and then update our Webflow blog post so that when we inspect the image, you'll see that there's actually alt text added here. So I'm going to inspect right now. You can go to the right click and click inspect, and you'll see in the image right here, it says alt, that there is nothing there. So you could also click on properties, I believe, and you'll see that there's nothing in the alt text here. What we're going to do is we're going to basically update the HTML so that the alt text, so we add alt text to each of the images here. We have, I believe, 6 images in this post. If you want to go, and check it out yourself right now, go to our blog and go ahead and inspect the images. So the final output that we will be creating is just this updated blog with images that have alt text. All right, so If you go into the template that says add image alt text to HTML, this is where we're going to get started. And the reason why this template starts with HTML and ends with HTML is because you can actually use this template in other templates, depending on WordPress, Webflow, etc. I don't necessarily know the CMS that you use. However, we will provide a template so that you can add this to your CMS pretty conveniently, and we'll use this as an app within our template. But for now, we're just going to take a look at this app, which starts with HTML, and then it will end with HTML. However, I have added a step here that pushes to our Webflow. I will then show you kind of what this looks like within another app so that you can run this, basically iterate over all of your over all of your content. So this is just one HTML, one blog that we're working through right now. So the input, let's just take a look here, is just HTML. And I've pulled this out from the HTML of the blog post right here. This is the corresponding HTML, and I'll show you kind of how I did this a little bit later, but to show you this, individual step, I've pulled out the HTML. And if you notice, it does not have the alt tag right here yet. That's what we will be adding. And the first step that we want to do is we want to get a list of all of the image tags from the HTML, because we're going to go through each image tag and then we're going to run the LLM step on each of the images. So to do this, we basically need to use a little bit of code. Today, my goal is not to go into too much detail about the code. However, I will show you kind of the output to show you what this step looks like. So let me run this. And we now have a pretty clean version of a list of all the images in our blog. So if I go to this image, I should get that Jack Altman tweet. And for each of these images, we're going to run an LLM step. Now, if you have not worked in AirOps before, there is a key concept that you'll need to understand for our iteration step, and that is that you need to pass a list into the iteration step for it to iterate over a list of elements. A list is an object that begins and ends with these square brackets, and they have elements within them, which can either be, numbers, these are strings, or even objects. So we are going to pass step1.output here into the actual iteration step. And then what that means is for every element in that list that we have, which is the image, we are going to run a prompt on it. Now, this is a prompt that I kind of created using a technique. Basically, we're going to ask GPT-4 first how to best optimize the alt text so that it has a better understanding of what it should do. We call this chain of thought prompting. This basically helps it process through the logic of what makes a good image. And then once we ask it to evaluate the image, it basically generates better alt text because it's gone through its own list of what makes good alt text. So if you take a look here, we've told it, okay, I actually put this at the top of the list because it was not giving me specific proper nouns, but we tell it, okay, include specific proper nouns when appropriate, precise and relevant description, keywords, be succinct, avoid redundant phrases, and contextualize the image. So here we finally say, okay, include any proper nouns in the image. I had to explicitly tell it this. Avoid photo of, image of, or screenshot of, because that's kind of what it was starting out with by default. And then output the alt text only without the phrase. Then the way that we pass this images into the step is through step2.element. So again, this is specific to our iteration step. If you remember the output of step 1, each of these is the element that we're going through in our iteration step. So when we say step 2.element, what we're actually doing is we're passing this individual element through this step, and we're running it 6 times. So when I say step 2.element here, what it's going to do is it's going to pull a single image and it's going to evaluate. Then the output of this iteration step is also going to be an array or a list. And so let me show you what this output looks like. It's going to start generating. So in this case, it didn't give me, again, Jack Altman's name, unfortunately. It did in the last version. So I'm going to quickly cancel and show you what the last version did. Again, if we want it to be consistent and give us better output, we're probably just going to have to modify the prompt a little bit further so that it's consistent. But for now, I'm going to show you by running the next step to show you what was generated previously. It went through all of them. Let's see, let me run it one more time just to see if it can give us some better output. It might be a little bit variable here, but we'll just take a quick pass to see if it will give us some better, more specific output. Again, if you remember, the first image is Jack Altman, but it's not giving us that name. Okay, so we'll come back to this prompt so that it is, it says next to a profile picture of a man, which is not super helpful. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to continue while coming back to the prompt so that it can be a little bit more specific. However, if you do notice in the other images, it will say, interface of AirOps app. Let's go to the next photo here. Interface of an AirOps app with template section highlighted. It's very specific. It's very, detailed here. It didn't want to give me Jack Altman's name, which is fine for now. So this is the output. It's going to be in, again, the form of, or the format of a list. And so in our next code step, we just need to add this back to the HTML. Again, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the code itself. All that to say, there is some cleaning up you may need to do depending on your CMS. This is kind of the code that we needed to run for Webflow to make it actually compatible, again, with the platform. However, I'm going to run this so that you can see the alt text is now going to be in the actual HTML. So if you take a look here, image alt equals gradient background. So this is the updated HTML. Again, you'll need to maybe do a little bit of editing depending on your CMS. Let me see if we can take a look at the other ones. You take a look and see that the alt text is added throughout. So the HTML is ready to go, and we're going to actually update this to our Webflow. So I've already gone ahead and set this up as an example. I will say that I'm going to show you in a moment. This is probably not the most automated way to do this. I'm showing this as an example where I'm passing the collection ID manually, the item ID, and then I'm passing the content. This field is specific to your Webflow data or your WordPress data, so it may not look exactly like this. You would probably have to configure it to the fields that you have in your CMS. But I'm going to go ahead and publish just to show you that with this update step, it's going to actually update the site directly. At the end there, you saw I'm going to publish this directly. You don't have to publish. If you do not, this will go to staging, I believe. But we're going to do this live. So I'm going to press play. And with if there's no errors, you're going to see this JSON object right here. And you're also going to see the alt text that's here as well. So we're going to go back to the blog post itself and inspect again, and it should have the alt text updated. All right. So you can see here, the alt text has been updated. Not sure if you all can see that. You can also go to the properties. I guess this is alt, in which case we might need to escape the quotes. Or it says gradient. Let's take a look at another image. Yep. So if we take a look at this alt text here, interface of AirOps app. All right, so you can go ahead if you want to take a look at how to do this in your CMS, but if you inspect our own blog, we have now added the alt text to our own blog, which is pretty cool, to be honest. Any specific questions on updating alt text? I'm going to quickly show you what this looks like if we were to do this in an automated way. Again, this will be a template shortly. However, right now, I'm just going to show this in the demo. We're not going to run through all of the logs here because there are actually quite a few in this list. So what you would do is you would list all the blogs either through the integration in Webflow or WordPress is coming soon. So you'll be able to do this pretty easily with WordPress. This might create a little bit of lag here because there's just a lot of blogs. So we list out all the blogs in a collection, and it's not going to let me scroll right now because it's just overloading the browser a little bit. But it's given us a list that we can then update for every single blog. So if you wanted to go through every single blog in a collection, this is how you would do it. You would take this list of your collection items and you would pass it through an iteration step. And then what you would do is you would actually use an app that we've created before. If you are new to AirOps and you have never seen this feature before, what you can actually do is publish an app and then use that app within another template or another app. So that's what we're doing here. We've published the app that we just went through, add image alt text HTML. And then we just need to pass in that data, which is the HTML. This is just some liquid syntax to help us index into the HTML. If you notice the syntax of the object here, the HTML is within this content of this field data object. And so this is how we index into the content with liquid. And so for every element here, it would update or it would run this app and give us that HTML with updated alt text. And then to do this and update every single item, we would add that update collection item here, like we had seen before in the previous step. And this is going to update. And if we set it to publish, it would automatically republish what we had just created. We're not going to do this right now. However, I just wanted to show you what this looks like if you wanted to automate through an entire collection of blogs. All right. So any questions so far on how to update alt text and how to do this on a larger batch? Cool. If we don't have any questions, we are going to move forward and we're going to do our next use case. This is going to be image to data. image to data is a very cool use case where we're basically going to pull out data from an image. And I'm just going to show you some images that we're going to work through here. Again, this is, pretty dense, some of the data that you can actually pull out. In this use case, this is just a public balance sheet of an earnings call. I used to work at Capital One, so I just pulled them off the shelf. And I took a screenshot of this PDF. In the future, I think we're going to be able to support, PDF to image. However, I just took a screenshot for this example and turned it into a balance sheet that kind of looks like this. Now, I will say this looks really good so far. There are a couple of minor hiccups that could be adjusted. However, it does do a pretty good job of pulling out all of that data just through an image. All right, so this is what we started with. This is what we're going to end with. There are a number of use cases here that you could work with. So we're just going to dive in. And if you guys have any specific images that you want to work through, feel free to shoot them my way. So this is the image to data template. Again, you can go to the templates right here, scroll down, and it's going to be the first one right here. All right, so let's get started. I have actually listed here a couple of examples just in case you want to try this on different types of data. To start, we're actually just going to pull out tabular data because it is kind of the most straightforward example. And this is the structure that we need to write to Google Sheets. So again, in our start step, we basically have the same setup that we had before. We have the URL or we have the image file. It is pretty straightforward. The user needs to input either into the image URL or the file. The way that we actually show this or pass this through in our LLM step is in this field right here that has the image, and we apply this logic. If there's a URL, we're going to use it. Otherwise, we use the file. Now let's just take a quick look at this prompt. So this prompt starts out, with the system saying you are an image processor that accepts images of tabular data and then converts that into a list of objects. Only return the results in a list of objects, where each object is a row without nested lists. So this is just kind of a dummy prompt right here. If you've noticed, we're not actually passing an image. We're just giving it some dummy data to understand the structure that it needs to output. It does actually understand that this is the structure of the data from this prompt. And so this is kind of like a user assistant pair, but mostly only for that structure. Now, to give you some context, we need a specific structure to upload to Google Sheets. When you are writing to Google Sheets or when you are reading from a CSV, all of our data in terms of tabular data is in a very specific format. It is a list of objects where each object is basically a row, and each key here is going to be the column. So it's a very specific format. However, we use this both to read in information when you pass in a CSV. We also use this to write information for Google Sheets. And soon to come, we will be making CSV downloads available. So we're just using this assistant here to make this, to make the model understand the structure. And then we're asking it to extract the tabular data from a specific image. I provided a little bit more context saying, okay, the dollar values or numbers should be decimals. Here's how to format the percentages. Start and end with these brackets. All right, so this is the prompt that we have set up. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to show you what the output looks like, and we're just going to do the test directly on this image that I'm going to upload from my desktop. I believe that's already here, so we're just going to execute. Let's take a quick look. And we're going to test this step individually and see if it starts to give us the output that we want. I'm going to caveat this by saying I will probably update this template to also have a different data structure. The reason being because if you notice in the data structure that's output, which is a list of objects, every single column is going to be in every single row. So if you see here, name, age, that needs to be added to every single object, which is actually quite redundant. And the caveat is that there's only so much output from GPT-4 that you can actually generate. There is a max. So if you see here, each column is going to be generated every single time. It's probably not the most efficient way to do this. If you can imagine, a more efficient way would just be 2022 and then putting in a list every single item. That's likely to be more efficient than having to output an object with the header or that this tile every single time. So yeah, GPT-4 had to generate a lot just for our Google Sheets, and I think we can make this more efficient in the future. So watch out for that update. I will try to make this a little bit easier so that there's not going to be as much output. This is both cost efficient and probably faster in the long run. But if you can tell here, it's given us, a lot of the data that we want, and then it's in the format that we need. So it's given us a list of objects. So when we write to Google Sheets, it's going to output in this format. I'm a little bit curious as to this order, not 100% sure if this order was GPT-4. So we're going to just take a look and write it to Google Sheets. In Google Sheets, it's very straightforward to set up. You just need to integrate with your own account, click on this action, which is create spreadsheet. We will have a couple more actions like, read from spreadsheet, add a line to the spreadsheet, etc. And then you just need to pass the output of the data. So we're going to take a look at this. It did a pretty decent job. However, I will say, if we take a look here, there are probably some nuances that it didn't catch. For example, this header is just probably confusing for the model. So if we look at the actual data, it's probably not going to catch all of this separation here. I guess it did a pretty good job on these three. But for example, this column right here, it just didn't understand how to divide up these two columns. So I will say the best case scenario is if you have the data structure in mind, definitely pass that data structure to GPT-4 in advance, because it's just going to give you better results. It's going to give you that nuance that you're looking for. Whereas if you just ask it to give you, this general template, it may or may not catch the nuances, but it actually does a pretty good job so far. So this template is just a generic template overall. If you notice it just saying extract tabular data. Again, if you want to be specific, provide that data structure to it, and it will definitely give you those columns, the columns that you want. Cool, I'm going to pause here really quick. This is how we transformed, an image of the balance sheet into an actual spreadsheet. Again, there are a lot of use cases for this. If you can imagine just, analyzing data or being able to store data, public data over time, very powerful use case. If there are no questions, we are going to go on to the next use case, which is just a variation of what we have in the tabular data. However, we're going to take, an invoice, which is another interesting use case, and we're going to extract the data from that as well as transform it into such a format that is consumable for Google Sheets. All right, let me know if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so this is just an example of an invoice that I found. If you notice here, there is a little bit of tabular information. However, there is also unstructured information, and the key question is, how do we turn this kind of unstructured data plus some tabular information into a format that's actually usable in Sheets? What we're going to do here is one, I would recommend to you all, if you just have some with a little bit of code. Again, I don't love to walk through too much detail of the code. However, what we're going to do is we're basically going to transform this into an object that has, each item in a row. So let's see now. It's a little bit difficult because we have to kind of test one step. This should work. Let's try this. All right. So given the code that we passed here, again, not going to go into too much detail. However, you can definitely modify this to your use case. I have, basically you need to specify which list you want to expand on. And then from there, you're basically going to get a flattened object. So if you remember before, let's show you what it looked like before. We had an object with items. Now we have a list of objects with each of those items. And the reason, again, this is important is because in the previous data structure with a JSON object, you cannot actually push this to Google Sheets. It needs to be in a very structured list where each of these is a column, or each object is actually a row, and then these are column names. So we have 3 rows here, and this makes it very simple to actually push to Google Sheets. So we can just now push this to Sheets, and I'll show you what this looks like. Should be pretty simple. We now need to change the data that we're passing into Sheets. This is going to be step 3.output. I'm going to change that here. I'm just going to call this invoice data. I'm going to run this. It's going to give us a spreadsheet, and this is much cleaner. If you can tell, now we actually have each item on a separate row, and we have all of the information expanded out. Let me know if you have any questions. This is a really great use case, I will say, for a lot of automation. One of the keys that we're going to try to unlock for you all is how to do this at scale. If you notice right now, you have to upload one image at a time, or you have to pass an image URL. Slightly manual, probably not ideal. What you really want to do in the long run is be able to pass in like a folder or a link to a folder and then iterate over all those images, because one at a time, it's just a little bit more tedious and manual and not as powerful. So we're going to try to unlock that for you all, so that you can just pass a folder, we can grab out those links, and then we can run over a bulk or a batch of images at a time. All right, so this basically sums up, the work in terms of the image to data. If you've seen here, we have transformed both, a tabular format into a balance sheet in Google Sheets. We've also taken some unstructured data, such as this invoice, and also turned it into a tabular format like this. Again, there is a little bit of work to do here. If you want to make this consistent, if you want to make this really powerful for your use case and not, arbitrary data, you basically need to specify those columns that you want to make sure that they are consistent over time. So that's what I would recommend. Definitely pass in your data structure in advance to make it consistent. Cool. I'm going to leave the last couple of minutes for any questions. Again, we've gone through quite a bit today. However, I do think that each of these use cases is really powerful, unlocks a lot of cool possibilities. Cool. Any other questions? If not, let's see. Thanks for joining, Glenn. Yeah, I really do think, we're going to come back to you all with probably a couple more use cases once we start to get bulk images unlocked. Thanks, Marcos.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us until the end. Thank you, Cindy, for your time and demoing so many useful use cases to us. What we'll be doing is breaking down this webinar into a playlist for ease of access, so you can access all these videos on our YouTube channel. They will be up very soon. If you want to take a look at our previous tutorials, they're already up on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. Otherwise, if you have any questions on past videos, feel free to drop YouTube comments under our videos and we'll get back to you. Thank you, Glenn, for your feedback. Templates are coming soon, and especially SEO is something that we're passionate about. So SEO use cases and templates will be up pretty soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you in the next event. The next event is going to be in January. The link is up on the worksheet that we sent you today. Feel free to subscribe to our community events calendar on Luma as well. That will help you stay on track of all the events that we're hosting for the community. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, everyone. We'll see you on Slack. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.